Hey, this is Cora-Leigh and this is my midterm oral assignment for Psych 516. The first question asks, how have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? Give an example of an event and the resulting outcome. One event in recent history that comes to mind is the legalization of same-sex marriage. Of course, the obvious effect of this would be that HR offices might have to restructure their benefit plans or their insurance packages to accommodate for these newly married couples. But it has resulted in a greater effect than just that. For example, prior to the legalization of same-sex marriage, the college that I worked for only had leave in place for maternity leave. And this was offered to both natural childbirth and also the adoption of newborns, but it was only offered to the mothers. After the legalization of same-sex marriage, our HR department had to just completely reorganize paternal leave as a whole. Because of the discrimination laws, it was also decided that paternal leave be offered to new dads in different sex couples so that they can adjust to life with a new baby as well. Obviously, this is a very recent event research-wise, but I would love to see the future effects of this. It has the potential to change the way that organizations offer all benefits for all employees, and the paternity leave result is just one of the many projected changes. I would especially like to see how a 4 to 6 week paternity leave affects productivity in the workplace, or even research into what male parents are choosing to take the paid leave and which ones are choosing to work through that period. Also think it would be interesting to see how this might affect the length of maternity leave, or either whether or not parents could choose to stagger their leave so that maternity leave is offered first and then paternity leave, so that one parent is home for the baby for an extended period of time. I think that would be especially interesting if both parents were working within the organization. Anytime there's a legal or cultural shift, organizations just have to respond. This in turn means that psychologists have to respond. This can mean just shifting the perspective of a particular research question or invite completely new research to be done. In reading the chapter, it was interesting to see how psychologists adapted to the changes that were happening and how they still affect current research to this day. Next question asks to describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program. Is the program successful in socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness? Graduate students are socialized into the online classroom of Liberty University by first being assigned an online graduate orientation course. This is my very first graduate course, and this is my very first time at Liberty, so I definitely found this extremely helpful. This course has modules that closer resemble many of the teaching devices used in the online classroom, as well as introduce users to other graduate students that might not necessarily be in their program. I would say that this course is highly effective in introducing new online learners to the use of Blackboard, as well as introducing newcomers to the culture and history of university as a whole. Graduate students are socialized into this program by completing test projects that mimic the assigned projects for the course. This is done first by having all students complete the new student checklist for each class. This checklist takes place in the same format as the tests within Blackboard. This is especially helpful for courses which have online timed multiple choice tests as part of their curricula. Then students are asked to introduce themselves in a forum post, which for this course especially is very relevant to future coursework, as forums and replies are assigned weekly. For this course in particular, I believe that the socialization process is very effective. With our introduction posts and then the subsequent posts after that, I have grown to know my classmates through their initial forum posts and replies, and even have been excited to read a certain student's posts, as I know that they're going to have an interesting interpretation on the assignment, and I'm going to be able to learn something from them too. So I think that it's definitely very helpful. The next question asks, how can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? One of the biggest work-family conflict issues that I see in my workplace is the use of technology and how it has blurred the lines in between work and home life, especially for salaried employees. even myself, as an hourly employee, have my work email on my personal cell phone, and I am guilty of not only checking it, but replying to incoming messages during non-work hours. The University system of Georgia doesn't expect its employees to work uncompensated, but checking of work email and logging onto one's desktop from a remote location, it's not monitored as well as it should be. I have even received email responses from colleagues when I knew that they were en route to another campus or a conference. And not only is this unhealthy for someone to not get adequate relaxation time, travel time, but it's also dangerous, especially if people are responding to messages on the road. Working during non-work hours, especially when one is responding to those outside the organization, like clients, for me, students, or customers, it also sets a precedent for those outside the organization to begin to expect work to be done outside of office hours. Once this precedent is set, it is extremely difficult to get rid of, especially now that in this day and age, people expect immediate answers or immediate results. And sometimes that's not possible. That's why we have processing times for a reason. But if we are continuing to message people outside of those specified times, they might grow to expect it for the future. I think one way that an organization can reduce this issue is to monitor employee web traffic during non-working hours. This would be extremely easily accomplished if the organization had an intranet system, which mine does. Oftentimes, I feel like our IT department has scheduled maintenance during for our intranet and other softwares deliberately during times so that they can reduce uncompensated working, whether that's intentional or not. It just seems that it's always during the hours where I might be wanting to stay late uncompensated just to finish something, and I'm like, nope, it's scheduled maintenance. So I would also recommend that students try to reduce the amount of emails outside of office hours from within the organization. I am probably 100% more likely to respond to my supervisor or another colleague on a night or a weekend than I am a student, especially if it seems to be really important. Since emails are time-stamped, it's important to send all inter-office communication during office hours to prevent other employees from working uncompensated. Next question. Imagine you have been asked to develop a performance assessment program for employee development. What techniques would you use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible? So, one of the most influential supervisors I've ever had asked employees to give a self-report about a week or so before our reviews. The saying that you are always harder on yourself than anyone else is going to be is entirely true in this situation. Once these were submitted, the supervisor would read our responses and respond to them. Most of the time, a category that I thought that I was underperforming in greatly was not even on my supervisor's radar. And she used this time to correct any negative thoughts that I had about my work habits or my job performance. And I think that that's a really helpful tool in evaluating job performance, is seeing how the individual feels like they're doing. I would like to further my supervisor's technique by annually asking employees what they consider to be the top 5 or 7 job duties, and then comparing them to their specified job descriptions. I think that this would be a really great indicator on what in-role duties to focus on, as well as to evaluate if other job duties that they're performing should be reassigned or officially added to the employee's job description. This is also a good indicator for why an employee might be underperforming in a particular job duty. They might just not see that it's as high of a priority as others, so it gives you a good opportunity to understand the full story as far as what particular areas that they are struggling in. I would combine these all and use the results from the self-report, my own evaluation of the employee's job study, to write a comprehensive report highlighting the employee's strengths and difficulties. You can tell I work at a school, as well as providing constructive comments for improvement. No one likes to be told or hear that they are underperforming on a job duty by their supervisor without any way to correct the issue. I believe that more constructive, positive criticism, so to speak, or how to do it better, is just a better way to lead employees towards higher performance while providing them with the information that they can use to positively affect their performance for the future. So not only are you telling them what needs to change, but telling them how they might change it. So it kind of empowers them to make the change rather than discouraging them. And I think the last question, what are some common possible organizational constraints, and how can they lead to counterproductive behaviors? So organizational constraints are defined as the limiting factors from inside the organization themselves. Constraints can be as simple as time, being that there's only 40 work hours per employee per week, or they can be system-based time constraints, like deadlines for automated processes. We have a deadline for the submission of time for employees, and as a manager, I have to remember to ensure that my employees' time is in a particular window. Otherwise, they will not get paid, and they like to get paid. So I have to try to do that. It can be a little bit difficult, especially if I am out of town or I'm on a work conference or I don't have access to the system that we use for timestamps during that amount of time. So that's sometimes difficult to make sure that it gets done in time, because it is, like I said, a certain window. We can't pre-approve time for the employee because we're not sure if they're going to show up early or late, so that it can get a little hairy there. Constraints within the organization could also be self-imposed, like using historical precedents to decide on an issue or complying with a company policy. I would say one of the overarching constraints would be organizational culture itself. So I talked a little bit about time constraints. I just want to further that a little bit. Time constraints are stressful on anyone, not even inside the organization, just as a person, they're stressful. And with stress comes ways that employees diffuse that stress, which that can take many forms. Some stress relief methods are positive, like attending a gym or taking time with a favorite hobby, but these things also take time. This can lead to CWBs such as production deviance or substance abuse. Everyone has had times at work, and I'm guilty of this as well, where they've de-stressed by checking messages or social media on their personal devices. While checking one's phone every once in a while is relatively harmless and considered pretty normal, what happens when 2 to 3 minutes turns into 30 minutes or an hour? Employees may not be cognitively thinking that they are getting back at the organization by not working, but there's enough talk of doing extracurriculars outside or on the company's dime that this can lead to a real issue. Furthering that, substance abuse, it can start as just having one alcoholic beverage after hours, then that might not affect the employee's day-to-day job performance or anything like that. But regular use can lead to dependence, use at work, progression into harder substances, and that can lead to negative productivity, absenteeism, and even legal violations. And jumping off of that, one of the most prevalent examples of how organizational culture, I know I mentioned that earlier, can lead to counterproductive behavior is seen in absenteeism. Organizations that allow more absenteeism, more unexcused absenteeism, tend to see higher absenteeism in their members. This is especially true for those in organizations who don't work tightly with a group, because they may not feel that their absence will really affect other people within the workplace. I work in a group completely, and I will oftentimes not take off work when I probably should, because I know that I am making it harder on my group members, and I'm just going to have to do double the work the next day. So it can kind of go both ways. Historical precedence also ties in directly with organizational culture. Organizations must ensure that they are socializing employees into an environment that does not promote CWVs. When someone is trained using the phrase, "this is how we've always done it," or "this is okay, I've done it a million times," they may begin to believe that behaviors that the company just would not tolerate are acceptable, such as theft. This can tie directly into social causes as well, with the issuance of women's rights and the Me Too movement. Some light is being shown on sexual harassment claims within the workplace. And if a person within the workplace has not been reprimanded for sexual harassment in the past, they may be likely to repeat it. Furthermore, if someone sees an authority member acting in the same manner, they may also begin to engage in that behavior because the supervisor is doing it. We have a lot of historical precedents in my line of work. Just with certain legal issues, this is how we've behaved in the past. This is what we were told to do, and sometimes that can discourage thoughts about change, because things do change. Things change all the time. Just miscellaneous things, they change. So we really have to challenge our employees to, I wouldn't say question everything, but just think about how maybe some recent changes might have affected our policies and procedures, and bring those to a manager, have them talk it out. That way we're not just doing what everyone's always done, and that can become an excuse for negligent behavior as well. So that was my midterm oral assignment. Again, I'm Cora-Leigh, and this is PSYC 516. Thank you.